Thank you, Bob. Ce qu'on va faire, on va avoir les questions après chaque intervenant, parce que les sujets sont très divers, et puis au lieu d'essayer garder 15 ou 20 minutes à la fin, on va tout simplement avoir des questions après chaque intervenant. Là, je vais... Oh, les slides sont déjà là. OK. Ce que je voulais... What I wanted to do today is to give you an idea of how injection drug use could lead to very quick outbreaks and localized outbreaks. The reason why I wanted to talk about it is that at NIH, about a year ago, they were questioning whether or not we should still put money in research for injection drug users. And that led to a lot of debate, and what happened at the end of December, they had a major outbreak in Indiana. So what I'm going to do is give you some background of, first, well, avancer, reculer.
You have to shoot a bear.
Up there. Is it on? No, it's on. Oh, okay. I don't know if I did it or he did it, but someone did it. Okay, the objectives is going to be to give you a quick overview of the epidemiology of injection drug use and HIV, and go over some of the recent outbreaks that occurred, and also give you a few suggestions for how we should be going about trying to prevent future outbreaks and containing current outbreaks. The next slide, please. Shoot up again. Okay, no, yeah, widespread. Next one. No, it doesn't work. I could just tell him to change the slides as I go along, or batteries. Okay. I guess he's going to come back. He's going to change something up there and try to make it work. Yeah, it was really interesting to see that they didn't want to actually invest any more research in injection drug users, and they wanted to reallocate the money to other risk groups because we had such a good success in reducing HIV among that population domestically and in Europe as well. But it will be helpful if I get my slides, so we'll wait. Okay, that's the third slide. Yeah. As you all know, the prevalence of HIV infection among drug users across the world, it's you got Ukraine that has extremely high rates. You got all of Southeast Asia, Brazil and Argentina are the main countries that have high prevalence levels of injection drug use. Here we go. Domestically in the US, we've seen drastic drops in incidence rates. If you look at the middle of the slide, shows you a time window between 1988 and 1990. The injection drug use was, at that time, injection drug use was the main route of transmission in the US, and it was the only time MSM had less incidence than injection drug use. But we saw an 80% drop in incidence over the course of about 10, 15 years, and it still dropped following those years. Currently, injection drug use represents about, if you look at men injection drug users, females, and MSM that also inject drugs, you're talking about 8 to 10% of the new incident cases are attributable to injection drug use. So it's relatively low. The people that are injectors represent about 20% of all the HIV positive in the US in terms of people that are currently living with HIV. Like I said, progress has been made, tremendous progress in Europe, Canada, US, but we've had a lot of localized outbreaks. To give you an example, in Greece, we saw like injection drug use representing only 2 to 3% in 2010, and jumping to representing 28% in 2011. And in 2012, it was almost half of the new incident cases. Following that, they implemented a lot of harm reduction, including needle exchange and opiate substitution therapy, which brought the rates back down. But it was Greece, it was very quick. This is what happened in southern Indiana in the US this past January to about early July. They saw 181 new incident cases in a community that has only a small town of 4,200 people. That's a humongous incidence rate. They were reporting, the people that were injecting, having on average 9 syringe sharing partners, and they also were using oxymorphone. It's an opiate prescription drug, but it required on average about 10 injections a day. So they were injecting a lot, and they were sharing a lot. And 85% of these individuals were co-infected with HCV. The markers in terms of trying to get some warning about potential outbreaks, they're looking at a HCV incidence and also increases in opioid use, being abuse of prescription drugs or heroin use, and overdose are typical markers that actually provide us with a good alarm about the potential for outbreaks. The demographics of these injectors, the new injectors in the US, has changed quite a bit over the last 5 years. They're a lot younger and they are in the majority Caucasian, and you get as many males and females. They're non-urban, which means they're either in the suburbs or rural counties, and the increase is being driven by the abuse of prescription opioids in these young population. When you look at the continuum of care for adults, that's what the cascade looks like in the US. You get about 31% of the people that are infected that are suppressed. But if you look at young people, it's drastically different, and it's a lot worse than the overall profile across the country. So this population is not accessing care. 7% of the people that got infected, of the 181 people in Indiana, were sex workers. And as we know, when you have concentrated epidemics of HIV, it could very quickly translate into heterosexual epidemics. China is a good example. Injection drug use and blood transfusion were the first routes of infection, and now heterosexual is the number one. So it doesn't take long when you have high concentrated HIV epidemics to spread to the heterosexual. The problem that we're running into in the US with these new abuse of opiates is we don't have good monitoring system. Like HCV, the epidemiology, especially local epidemiology is terrible. We don't have accurate data. We have overall profiles of the rates of infections, but we don't actually have good sentinel surveillance systems in place to alert us. The other thing is that needle exchange, drug abuse treatment, HIV treatment as prevention, and pre-exposure prophylaxis for making sure that those that are at very high risk are protected are the tools that we could use to actually prevent outbreaks from occurring. But in these rural counties, you don't see a lot of these the services provided to that population. You'll see later that there's a lot of legislation that makes needle exchange illegal, and the services for opiate substitution is almost non-existing in the rural counties. The one thing that we've been doing recently is trying to do a better job at integrating care for HIV treatment and substance abuse by providing training to the infectious disease docs to be able to diagnose addiction and be able to treat them. So we're trying to do a better job at integrating the HIV care with the drug abuse treatment care, because they're responsible for a lot of non-adherence and not retaining people in treatment. If you don't arrest the drug use, it will not. The other thing, there's a lot of barriers that are preventing us from being able to provide services to the injection drug user population. This figure actually depicts how many providers are willing to defer treatment to injection drug users. The red bars are representing people that inject daily, and you see that even at low CD4 counts, a large proportion of physicians do not want to provide art therapy to these individuals, even when their CD4 count is below 200. What's worse is when people start looking at the cascade of care within injection drug users, you'll see the profile shows that you got quite a bit of suppression, but sustained suppression is very low. If you look at the bar on the right, we have like 520 people that were suppressed at a given time. But if you look at how many are sustained, are able to sustain their suppression, it's only like a small number, 63 or so. So a lot of people look at viral suppression as an outcome, but they don't look at sustained suppression, which means the people are often on their therapeutics and they get rebound. Like I said, the rural community, like in Indiana, they had no HIV testing services available at all. It's one physician that actually diagnosed one patient, and then they called in the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, that did a network analysis and saw that they are a very defined and contained network of injectors in that area, and they started testing everyone, and that's how they were able to identify the 181 in a 6-month period. The worst problem we got with injectors in the U.S. is the delays in testing. They do access testing in general, but they typically do it when their disease has been progressing for quite a while. So we don't have good early detection for HIV positive people in the injection drug using population. Delay in care, they don't get linked to care rapidly, and we're not able to retain them in care. Those are the major problems that we have. Another growing concern, of course, is the HCV epidemic that's occurring in the U.S. We know that there's almost 4 million HCV positive people that have chronic HCV, compared to about 1.3 million HIV positive people. And the majority of the people that are HCV infected, of course, the main transmission route is injection drug use, about 80% of the cases. And we have the technology to provide rapid testing very readily, and the problem is that a lot of the people that are positive are unaware of their serostatus. About 75% that are HCV positive don't know that they are positive. It's the opposite of what we have with HIV. HIV, most people that are infected know that they're infected in the U.S., but with regard to HCV, it's the complete reverse picture. Also, the mortality related to HIV and HCV has flipped about 2006, where HCV mortality rates are surpassing HIV mortality rates. And with the new therapeutics, we are starting to implement what we call treatment as prevention that we use as a strategy for HIV. We're starting to implement that with HCV, but there is a lot of concern about the reinfection rates once you treat someone. There's unpublished data that is going to be presented at CROI this year, coming February, that shows that about 25% of the injection drug users that were treated and cured for HCV get reinfected in a short time period, within a 6-month time window. So that's going to be a major concern, given the cost also of the new therapeutics for treating HCV. It's an issue that we'll have to deal with. On the previous slide, yeah. The important thing that we've realized for quite a while is that all HIV epidemics are really localized. What happens in Los Angeles is completely different than what happens in Chicago or New York. And you've got to have good epidemiological information about your local epidemic, because when you look at the national statistics, it doesn't tell you to know what the incidence is nationally, or to know what the prevalence levels are, doesn't allow you to do better targeting of interventions locally where the picture is completely different. And we, of course, know that there's not a single intervention that can take care and contain an epidemic, so we have to be aware of addressing both primary and secondary prevention. In the past, up to about 5 years ago, most of the attention for HIV prevention was devoted to trying to prevent acquisition. It was primary prevention. And with treatment as prevention, the focus swing back to trying to prevent transmission of infections with treatment as prevention that has gained a lot of popularity. But it's a combination of both addressing primary and secondary prevention, transmission and acquisition. Integrating, like I said, the substance abuse and treatment, and as well as the treatment of HIV, is a must. Otherwise, you will not be able to keep these injection drug users on therapeutics and retain them in care services. There's a lot of barriers that varies. Like in the south of the United States, there's very conservative laws that make opiate substitution therapy almost illegal. Needle exchange is illegal in a lot of areas, and so you have to contend with actually trying to identify the individuals that are positives, and once you know, you've got to link them to care, and we don't have local people. The physicians are general practitioners typically, and there's very few of them. So one intervention that we're trying to look at is to use telemedicine to get infectious disease docs that are in cities close by to the rural populations and have them monitor the treatment of these HIV patients that are seeing general practitioners in these rural countries. So, and there's tremendous resistance to implement harm reduction programs. We know that there's a bunch of prevention strategies that have been shown to be very effective with injection drug users. I scratched out the counseling because in the past, most people that were doing testing were also doing counseling, pre-testing counseling, and it really created a barrier because it's very time-consuming and it's costly to provide counseling. So we had a study that got published in JAMA about a year ago or so, a year and a half, looking at whether or not it made a difference to provide counseling prior to testing versus just testing and providing educational information to the patients, and it had no effect whatsoever on incidence. So what we like about those findings is that it's going to allow people to be able to do more testing and not be constrained in having to have counseling provided. Of course, they do the counseling for all the HIV positive people, but providing counseling to everyone doesn't have any impact on incidence rates. And that's it. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to respond.